Okay, good evening. Hello. We need to start with begin with electing a chair for the next year. So could I take any nominations, please?
Can I nominate Councillor Mark Ligo?
Yes. And then is anybody going to second that? Okay. And then could I take a vote, please?
Need to do further nominations.
So I would do that first.
Do
Okay.
further nominations.
Okay, and further. Yes. And is anybody seconding that? Okay, and any further nominations? No, okay, could we please then take a vote for Councillor Ligo? And could we please take a vote for Councillor Miles? Okay, Councillor Miles.
Thank you very much, everybody. Can I now take nominations for the vice chair for this year, please? Okay, we've got a nomination here from Mark Ligo, who's second. Councillor Louise Upton. Do we have a nomination for vice chair? For Councillor Raymond, and second. This is for the Licensing and Gambling Acts Committee.
Yeah. No.
Pardon. So no, was that? Yeah. Councillor Mundy. Any seconder? Councillor Raymond. Any other nominations at all for this? No. Can we take a vote then, please? For Councillor Ligo first, please. All those 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Can we take then a vote for Councillor Mundy, please?
So, yeah, 7 on both. Toss the coin.
Yes.
Okay.
Last year.
Okay, so as we've got a tie vote, I'm going to flip a coin and then I'm going to ask Councillor Ligo heads or tails, okay? Heads or tails?
I'm going to go with heads.
That's tails.
Okay.
It's tails. So
Councillor Mundy.
Councillor Mundy
is duly elected as vice chair. Thank you very much. These things happen. It's just think sometimes it's as a councillor that happens, doesn't it? Because that happened historically here as well. So thank you very much. Have we got any apologies for absence today? I don't think we do.
We do say Councillor Rule.
Councillor Rule. Yeah, Councillor Rule has sent her absence. Apologies. Any declarations of interest for today's agenda? Can't see any. Then appointments to the subcommittee is now, this is the Licensing and Gambling Casework Act subcommittees. And so we appoint as many licensing case subcommittees of 3 members as there are combinations of 3 members and total number of members of the committee. Yeah, if I will pass over to Jonathan, who will clarify the complexities of this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Miles. So as it says in the report, we basically nominate as many subcommittees as we need. It's because they're somewhat ad hoc, we don't assign membership, but what we're saying is as long as you attend the training, which I believe is going to be on the 3rd and 5th Licensing and Gambling Act subcommittees. So if you don't sit on that, unfortunately, you will not be able to put your name forward when the call for nominations is sent out by officers. Does anyone have any questions on that report through the chair?
No questions?
Just also say these are not bound by any political proportionality. So it's very much 3 members of any political groups on the council.
Okay, so then if we can just note then the powers and duties of the subcommittees and then agree on the dates in which the subcommittees will meet, which is as required. So there are no dates before us other than the training, which we've been informed. So I think with that matter, we can just note this and then move on. Happy to do that.
You need a vote to agree the subcommittee.
Okay, we do have to agree the subcommittee composition based on what Jonathan has said. So all those in favour, please raise their hand. I think that's unanimous. Thank you. So that passes. Then we move on to the first substantive agenda item, which is a cumulative impact assessment. And for this,
Yes.
are we inviting?
Yes, we're going to have to, sorry, just to make space for officers at the table. Councillor Mundy, would you mind coming to sit as vice chair at the top? And then we'll make space for officers to come and sit up here, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Upton, would you be able to move to the gap on this side and councillor, and then everyone move down one? Is that okay? Just so we have space for officers. I'm very sorry. We have not enough microphones and seats for a committee this large.
Don't worry. And do we need, they've got one there. That's fine.
Yeah,
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We might need one more chair. Or
I need to speak.
if you could just move up. Yeah.
Yes.
Are you going?
Yeah, leave the speakers where they are, yes.
They're not on.
Thank you.
So is Katie, who's intending to present? Katie will present. Okay.
So councillor Hodding was speaking on this item, so he's going to speak first, and then Katie will present. And a big question, Katie should put afterwards. It's your discretion as to whether he has any follow-up questions or not. He's got a 5-minute limit.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you. I understand that we've got we've got one of the councillors who's requested to speak on this item. So Councillor Hollingsworth is going to be invited up now to make a public remark, and then we will hear from the officers to present the report thereafter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone working, camera working. Right, the only thing I'm not sure about is my eyesight and whether I wrote these notes the right font size, so we'll see how we go. First of all, I just wanted to say this is in no shape or form absolutely any negative comment on the report, the drafting of it, or anything of that sort. It is, as you'll hear, more of a comment on one of the things it is based on. So it is in no shape or form critique of the officers who've written an excellent report. It's the other issue that I'm wanting to address. And I should also say that among my cabinet responsibilities is licensing, it says in one word. So make of that what you will. It's clearly not decision making here, but depends, you know, in the sense of planning. I see the difference clearly between a local plan and planning policy and planning decision making on an application, which is a planning committee. This is clearly the equivalent of a planning committee, albeit governed by different legislation. So we'll see how this goes, but I will be very brief through this. So this is a brief address, I hope. The original version of the saturation policy dates the early 2000s. When the trend for new licenses at that point was what were known as vertical drinking locations. Those of you of a sufficient age, me, will remember these were large bars without seats and very high volume noise. And that was based on the evidence that if customers were standing up and unable to talk to other customers, they are much more likely to drink heavily. The result was greater revenue for the bar. and of course, greater revenue levels of antisocial criminal behaviour on the streets. And that is why the City Council was right to adopt a policy that made it possible to prevent the city centre and other areas being overrun by increasing serious problems. So that was the reason for it. That was then, and this is, and it was the right thing to do then, but 2025 is now, and many underlying factors have changed. Fortunately, vertical drinking locations have largely disappeared. But what we're seeing across Oxford, as elsewhere, is that we're losing premises that bring together leisure, culture and art. So we see fewer clubs, fewer places with live music, fewer places where local people can enjoy a particular sort of night out in their own city. The starting point of the CIA, as set out in paragraph 4 of the report, is, and I quote, that the number of licensed premises and club premises certificates within the city centre and East Oxford area is such that it is likely that granting further licences or variations to licences would be inconsistent with the authority's duty to promote the licensing objectives. That is written as if the maximum number of premises has been reached and is being maintained. But the evidence is that certain sorts of premises, for example, clubs, are in decline. The original policy more than 20 years ago was to stop the growth of certain sorts of premises that were clearly a problem. What the CIA now implies is that the objective is overseeing a reduction in certain sorts of license that are not, in my view, just mine, are not clearly a problem. If one looks at paragraph 14 of the report about crime data, there is no decrease in crime levels since the last saturation policy was introduced. However, that is despite that in recent years there has been a reduction in certain types of premises, such as clubs. That suggests that there may be other factors in the level of crime that are not directly related to premises. For example, alcohol is obtainable in retail places. And drinking throughout the day, as is evident in many different places in the city centre and East Oxford, including sometimes combined with drug use, can end up in antisocial or criminal behaviour by the early and later evening. So in other words, I've got a concern that a policy which is aiming to limit or reduce the number of different types of premises might be failing to tackle, because it cannot, because they're very different issues, other underlying causes. So what I would like to ask you as the committee to do is to defer your decision, not your discussion, your decision on the saturation policy, and to ask for the data and the evidence to be reviewed and potentially reconsidered. I'm not inherently opposed to the existence of a saturation policy. After all, it was vital when it was introduced, but that was more than 20 years ago, and things have changed a great deal. And I imagine a pause, a review, and maybe a rethink of some of the detail here might well be the wise choice for 2025. Thank you very much.
I think you can, it's at our discretion, is that right? Yeah, you can stay there. I think we're going to hear the report from the officers in a moment, and maybe it could be that there are councillors that will have questions that might want to clarify with you. So I think it's okay if you're happy to. Thank you very much. Thank you. So at this point then I would like to invite Katie Thorpe, our supervising senior licensing officer, to represent the council and present the report to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to present the cumulative impact assessment for 2025 to 2028 following the 9-week consultation period. Cumulative impact assessment is an evidence-based tool when considering adoption of a special saturation policy. The current CIA states the authority is of the opinion that the number of licensed premises and club premises certificates within the city centre and East Oxford area is such that it is likely that granting further licences or variations to licences would be inconsistent with the authority's duty to promote the licensing objectives. The current 2022 to 2025 cumulative impact assessment is found at Appendix 1. At its meeting on the 10th of February 2025, the committee instructed officers to proceed with the cumulative impact assessment consultation process. During the 9-week consultation period, the authority received responses from responsible authorities, Oxfordshire Fire and Rescue and Thames Valley Police, and a further 27 responses from the public. Both Oxfordshire Fire and Rescue and Thames Valley Police strongly agreed to keeping both special saturation policies in the city centre and East Oxford. Their concerns are outlined at paragraphs 8 and 9 of the report. The authority received 17 responses from residents of Oxford, 5 responses from people who work in Oxford, 7 responses from local businesses or managers who hold premises licences, and 1 response from a business owner or manager who does not hold a premises licence. All of those responses can be found at Appendix 2. Those responses from the public that disagreed raised concerns that Oxford does not have a thriving nighttime economy and that continuing with the policy will lead to multiple businesses closing. Those responses from the public that agreed raised concerns similar to those highlighted by the responsible authorities: the drunken behaviour, safely walking through Oxford at night, threatening behaviour by drunk people, and noise resulting from drunken behaviour. There is an amendment to the wording of the report in paragraph 14. So it refers to Oxford's top 4 LSOAs, but this should be the 4 LSOAs that are relevant to the 2 special saturation areas. The crime data, which was received directly from the police, illustrates there has been no significant decrease in relevant crime in the 4 LSOAs since the previous SSP was adopted, and all the offence statistics for those areas are above the Oxfordshire rate. The 4 LSOAs are located within the darker areas of the maps, which represents higher number of reports, which is a high concentration of nighttime economy venues. The violence with injury data and the hospital data received from the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner for Thames Valley correlates with the nighttime economy, with a concentration around Friday and Saturday nights and 30% of hospital admissions being alcohol related. The authority must ensure it implements measures to prevent public nuisance and crime and disorder arising from the concentration of premises in an area. Therefore, significant weight is applied to the responses received from responsible authorities, in particular the police, who are the lead authority for the prevention of crime and disorder. The authority considered the responses that disagreed with the SSP and applied limited weight to those concerns. The SSP does not supersede consideration of an application on its own merits. Instead, it ensures applications that are granted with robust conditions to uphold the licensing objectives. Taking into account all the evidence gathered throughout the consultation period, the authority has proposed a cumulative impact assessment for 2025 to 2028. The assessment sets out that the authority remains of the opinion that the number of licensed premises and club premises certificates is such that it is likely that granting further licenses or variations to licenses would be inconsistent with the authority's duty to promote the licensing objectives. The cumulative impact assessment 25 to 28 can be found at Appendix 3. The committee is therefore requested to recommend to full council adoption of the CIA 25 to 28, which retains the SSP covering the city centre and East Oxford. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie. Any questions? I've got a question from Councillor Upton, please.
Yeah, Katie, I don't understand what the objectors' argument is that they think this will lead to the closure of multiple businesses. Presumably multiple businesses are existing now and we're not asking to close any of them. What do you think their argument is? Why do they think this policy is going to cause businesses to close? I appreciate that's not your argument, it's what someone has said to you, yeah.
Yeah, I guess like you said, it's hard to answer because there isn't a lot of evidence to suggest that the CIA and the SSP has resulted in businesses that are within the SSP already have closed as a result of this policy being in place. So it's hard to answer that, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
So sorry, just to be clear, then you don't think it will result in the closure of existing businesses. It might limit opening of future ones, but as we outlined, we could still agree to open future ones as long as we have good conditions in place. Is that right?
Yeah, so no, I don't disagree. hang on, let me get this right. I don't think the SSP in place is resulting in businesses closing. And like I mentioned, the SSP doesn't stop applications from being considered on their own merits. It just ensures that if there are conditions added by like Thames Valley Police, for example, they're robust to ensure that the licensing objectives are upheld.
I think councillor Taylor, please, and then we've got councillor Ottino afterwards.
I couldn't see a way in which businesses would close as a result of the SSP, but I could see a thing that happens in the nightlife industry a lot is that a business would close and then a new business would open on the same premises. And our planning rules encourage this. It encourages cultural venues like nightclubs to stay at the same location. And I could see that being severely restricted by this policy. We've seen quite a few places, for example, where there's an application for the underground bar that's coming on the old location for Plush, and that was that place closed years ago, and so we've seen places where businesses have closed, not there's been years before something's reopened. They're still vacant after years, and I think that's the only thing I could think that might have been getting on regarding businesses closing or not being able to reopen. Is how I would personally phrase that. Although I don't agree with what they were saying. I'd more phrase it as businesses struggling to reopen as a result of the policy or something like that.
Thank you. I think councillor Ottino, please. Thank you.
Yeah, a couple of questions. Why does the cumulative impact area for the city centre not include the Westgate Centre, given that there are bars on the roof of it, and as you exit the Westgate Centre, you will end up in Bond Square pretty much always? Secondly, why is there one policy for two different areas of the city? I could see that you might feel there might be saturation on the Cowley Road, but not in the city centre or the other way around. Why is it being considered as one rather than two different policies? And then thirdly, is there a way of the data that you get from the police, I presume, about crime on the Cowley Road in the city centre? Is there a way of seeing whether those incidents come from people that have used bars as opposed to people that are drinking on the streets and using drugs on the streets? As I'm aware that particularly in the city centre there's a community of people who do use drugs and alcohol on the streets, and I work with them. I know they're often victims and perpetrators of violence, so just worried about the data being skewed by that.
I think Katie or Joshua, who is a general licensing team manager, will answer your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Why is Westgate not in it? Because when the borders were drawn, we had the evidence that the premises at Westgate were not creating any additional crime and disorder. Essentially, the data from the police particularly when the map borders were done, did come with locational hotspots. We also know from our licensing regulation and compliance where the problem areas fall, which correlate to the crime and disorder for the city. And we know that the premises above the Westgate have been well managed by the Westgate security and have not contributed to the cumulative impact in the rest of the city. Issues that have arisen there have stayed there and been managed by on-site security. And that came from the police analysis from the 2022 assessment. And since then, as the stats have not changed dramatically, that's why the recommendation to keep it out retains, because essentially there's no evidence that it has contributed. So that's why it's not within the border. The second point, why is it one policy, not two? That's simply just how the policy of this type works. It's a single policy that a city or district would adopt, and within that district, you are permitted to have more than one area that is deemed as having a cumulative impact. So in the city, we have the Cowley Road, East Oxford area, and then we have the city centre area as our two areas that form part of our one special saturation policy. And the cumulative impact assessment, which what we're looking at right now, is essentially the data that you're looking at and relying upon to then be happy to have that policy in place. It's the tool we use to agree on the policy. Okay, did you want to do the third question? You did, about the police data, does it come from, specifically from premises?
So the data that was provided from the police is the overall for Oxfordshire, and then we were able to drill down into those specific areas. So it didn't drill down as deep as where those offences occurred, where they came from. The consultation period was quite limited in being able to drill down into that kind of specific data. So it's more of a general. But the data that was provided did point towards the nighttime economy, mainly Fridays and Saturday nights. So there is a correlation there between the nighttime economy and licensed premises.
If I may just clarify, yes. So it's the combination of data. On its own, the police data, you can't see where it comes from necessarily. It's in combination with the hospital data that shows their admissions are alcohol-based injuries and come from alcohol-based incidents. And then the timings of that hospital data as well aligns with nighttime economy, and the same with the police data and the CCTV data that we have. Also, the timings for those align with nighttime economy, and our guidance from the Secretary of State's guidance on how to interpret and how to use this evidence is that you use those correlations to draw them together, because we simply couldn't look at, say, police have 20,000 incidents in the city. We couldn't check to see if 20,000 incidents come from a licensed premises, particularly because sometimes they're reported in front of a licensed premises, but maybe not because of the licensed premises. And it's about that cumulative impact of people being in an area, not necessarily because of the sale of alcohol, but it's the existence of enhanced nighttime economy that creates more people, more queues, more alcohol, more noise, and then cascades on to be essentially more issues, which is what the special saturation policy is trying to prevent.
Thank you. I hope that clarifies. Follow-up question from Councillor Martino, but I've got Councillor Roman as well, and I've got Councillor Mundy, and yeah.
So can I just come back about the Westgate Centre? Because the policy is about venues that don't exist yet, isn't it? That's what it's stopping happening. So sort of irrelevant that there's not a problem with venues in the Westgate Centre now, because potentially, you know, there are empty units there. I think they could suddenly decide they want a nightclub, or there used to be a nightclub, I think, in the old Westgate Centre, if I remember rightly. Obviously went there. I find it hard to believe it doesn't impact on the city centre. That, you know, the main exit is Bond Square. That's one of the problem areas, I'd have thought, in the city.
I would say all of the premises at Westgate currently have a capped time in which they close. So nowhere in Westgate opens up into that late nighttime economy, like the premises that are licensed on Park End Street, Hythebridge Street, a couple, one or two on George Street, and then Cornmarket as well. The hours for those, when they kick out, when they go forth, currently don't impact. Westgate, part of Westgate used to be in one of the policies when the evidence that we had did show that part of the heat map was there. And this is simply a case of the evidence you see in front of you is what we've been able to pull up. You're welcome to draw different conclusions about the evidence itself, but you've seen the analysis we've done, and essentially we're saying that the Westgate doesn't necessarily need to be in there because the police aren't attending Westgate.
So just to, I guess, to clarify, it's about retrospective data that informs the future policy rather than predicting what is going to be like in the future. I think Councillor Roman, you are next in line, so please, your question.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I think the point James made is similar to the presentation that we had from Alex. The suggestion is that a club there was 20 years ago under a different restriction. Now it doesn't work, that model doesn't work. But because a new potential club or premises has to fit in with the model that didn't work, so therefore the extra businesses don't come up because they're still restricted by something that happened 20 years ago. So I think that's a point that they're trying to make, that what worked 20 years ago doesn't work now, so I kind of agree with that. It's quite evident in the city centre that we've lost many clubs. I mean, I don't think anybody can argue about that. Regarding the Westgate, so we've got the city centre, and then we've got East Oxford. We've got Westgate right in the middle of the city centre. So the implication is, would premises, because it's not the Westgate's not included in the CIA, so does that imply, or does that mean that premises in the Westgate get preferential treatment because they're not covered by the CIA as opposed to George Street? So that's one question. Another question is, compared to Oxfordshire, the city or any city would probably have more people coming in, so there would be more, we have more police on that. So is it a percentage of how it works? So I would expect city centre to have more issues than, I don't know, than Wantage, for example. So yeah, it would, that's what I would expect. So I just want clarity on the numbers around when you say that Oxford is above Oxfordshire, because I would expect it to be. I would expect any main hub to be a lot higher than anything else. So those are my two real questions. Regards to the police and the fire service, less work with them would always be good. So it's very difficult for you to judge, I think, for us to judge. And I kind of agree with the presentation that we had today, that actually we need a deeper thing, because I've lived here all my life. I did mention that I went to a club in the Westgate many, many years ago. You come into the city centre now, it feels like Sunday every day of the week, whereas there used to be something going on. And, you know, we need that. The whole city needs that. We don't, the taxi trade needs it, the restaurants need it. It is a cumulative effect. Where there's nightclubs, for example, somebody would be more inclined to open a restaurant or something else. So it's not just about drinking establishments, it's about the whole economy. And I think the nighttime economy overall is suffering. So I think we should have another look at it.
So just with reference to the first point, just to, I guess as Joshua answers, maybe just to clarify whether or not this prevents any cumulative impact assessment actually is preventing a new applicant to be licensed for the purposes of the Licensing and Gamblings Act. My understanding is it doesn't stop it if there are no objections, but if there are objections, it comes to committee. But if you could clarify the process in answering the question, okay, maybe just clarifying that as well in answering.
Sorry,
yeah.
Chair, can I?
Yeah.
So my point was that, you know, the rules that were set 20 years ago, they don't work. Hence, the establishments are closing, and new establishments are not coming in their place because the rules that we set 20 years are now not working for the business. So it's not that we're having restriction. I understand that everybody can apply, but when they apply, they're still restricted by the same rules that we had 20 years ago. And obviously that clearly doesn't work. That's why the clubs that were there in the first place have closed. So my question is, I agree with Alex that our rules are outdated, therefore, you know, the impact of what's happening in the city centre, it doesn't base just on clubs or drinking establishments. There's not a definitive answer to that. I don't think this covers it definitively.
Okay, Joshua, could you clarify the responses then to the questions? Thank you.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I might start by trying to explain the context of this policy in Oxford and the reality of how it operates. Because I think Councillor Hollingsworth made a really nice point in his opening about the language used with the CIA and the SSP, in that it is incredibly strong language. It's the recommendation we're saying is, it feels like we're at a cap of premises and this is all it is. We will not consider any other applications because of the existence of this policy. That is not the reality of how this policy operates in Oxford. And that's supported by the statement, the Secretary of State's guidance on that a published cumulative impact assessment and a policy like the special saturation policy can be the basis for refusal of an application, but it does not change the fundamental way in which decisions are made or that conditions are imposed. Essentially, each decision for any application is still considered on a case-by-case basis as to whether or not the application has put forward anything that supports the licensing objectives. So when we receive an application within the special saturation policy zone, at no point do we turn around and say, sorry, we're at a cap, you can't submit that. See you later, have a nice day. What happens is the application is received. If the licensing authority looks at it and thinks it's really lacking detail, the operating schedule hasn't proposed conditions, for example, hasn't stated how they will manage dispersal or how they'll manage crime and disorder in the area, we will then at those early stages, with the SSP as our reason to do so, recommend that they're getting early contact with the police, with the Environmental Health Department, with ourselves, to look at that application and fill it out to make it a bit more robust, make it useful and reliable, and to protect and uphold the licensing objectives in the city. And then if we go through that early stage process and the police or another responsible authority or ourselves still look at the application and say, it's still really going to impact on these areas, it's at that point, there'll be a report written that it's recommended to go to a subcommittee for a decision. And this is rare. Cowley Road in the last 3 years has had 58 new premises or variation applications. 7 of those went to a subcommittee, despite all of them being within the special saturation zone, which means 51 of those applications were just granted as applied for. That's the OX1 area, which covers most of the special saturation zone. Cowley Road, again, only had in the past 3 years 4 matters go to a committee for a new premises or a variation, which is what this is relevant to. And of those 4 that went to committee, all were granted. None were refused. What did happen at those committees is either the applicant generally would come to an agreement with the police or another responsible authority about adopting conditions, and then the subcommittee is essentially just ratifying the fact that everyone now agrees this license should have these conditions, or quite often the hours are curtailed or changed in some way. So maybe they applied for 5 a.m. and then the subcommittee said, look, based on all of this, we're going to grant until 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. Actual refusal of an application is incredibly unlikely. And I couldn't find a refusal based on the SSP going back, I think 8 years I looked. So that's kind of the context of how it operates. Did you want to answer the questions before I move on?
Sorry, Chair, the second question was, because you're not including the Westgate in your CIA, so is this Westgate getting preferential treatment by you not including it compared to somebody in premises in George Street? It's all part of the city centre. Nobody can dispute that it's not part of the city centre. So are you suggesting that if George Street clubbed together and put a couple of security guards at either end, you would omit them from the CIA as well?
If you don't mind, Chair. Yeah. Thank you. Referring to it as preferential treatment is not the correct way to look at this policy. This policy, any application in the city, regardless of its location, will still go through the similar or the same scrutiny in terms of its need to uphold the licensing objectives. The difference with this policy is those people that apply in those areas, when they apply, they must do so with the thought that I can't just submit a blank application saying nightclub to this time for this. They have to think about it, about how and what they're going to do, and enter that on their application. And that's why the policy exists, to flip that assumption that it's not that you just get a license if you apply for it. You have to think about it. You have to show how you won't impact the licensing objectives in a negative way. So it's not about preferential treatment. That argument could be made about anyone on the edge of a border of any area. If there's a line drawn, there'll be someone across the road from that line, no matter where you draw it. And so saying one area has a preferential treatment to another, I don't think is a useful analogy. If I was addressing some of the other points, you asked about the fact that you expect Oxford to have higher crime than other districts like in Wantage. And I think that's exactly the point of the CIA, the cumulative impact assessment, is these policies are adopted in cities. You don't see these policies in rural districts. You don't see these measures in areas that don't have a high density of or quite a strong nighttime economy. They only exist in areas such as ours, that is the city. So I think yes, I agree. They are different, but that's why the city has to look at this. But our colleagues at South Oxfordshire don't need to look at this. They don't have to manage the same level of crime.
Thank you. I think we've got, Lois, Councillor Mudderman has a point, and I think there might be a film.
Thank you, Chair. So I have two questions for Councillor Hollingsworth. Let's wake up. So one is, if we did pause and review, as you suggest, what new evidence, can you clarify a bit more about what kind of new evidence we'd be looking for? That's one question. My second one is also for you. Given the stats we've just heard from officers that there has been no refusal based on the SSP in the last 8 years, no refusal in the last 8 years, does that influence your request? Those are my two questions.
Good questions. Question number one, I don't think there is an issue with the data that you have. And I think Councillor Ottino touched on this, it's have you actually got the depth necessary to draw something from it? So, for example, I haven't looked at this, but if, say, Bond Square is where there is a lot of criminal and antisocial behaviour and the Westgate isn't, is that because the Westgate as a private sector area doesn't have any crimes happening in it? They're all recorded as happening immediately outside it. That happens with private bodies. So that would make for an interesting study to check whether that's right. I don't know. It may be that everyone is incredibly law abiding in the Westgate. I mean, the sense when I go there is that they are, but we don't know that. The point Councillor Ottino made, there are a lot of people who are resident in, connected to, looked after in places in the city centre. You just have to look at every single supermarket that sells alcohol, and you will see those people buying or obtaining through other means alcohol and drinking it. And by the end of the day, if sufficient alcohol is drunk and things have not gone well, that can end up in antisocial behaviour or even criminal behaviour. That's got nothing to do with premises, because you're looking at premises which, you know, sell meals, drinks, whatever. So I don't, it's more a matter of looking at the depth and trying to see whether you're drawing the right conclusion from it. In answer to the 50, whatever it was, I would pick up what Councillor Raymond said, and which I completely agree with. If you just look at numbers on bits of paper, what you're seeing is how many people have applied and then what happened. What you are not seeing is how many people looked at the CIA, talked to friends and went, do you know what? I don't think this is worth it. I could go somewhere else and set this business up because it will work better, because in Oxford, they're going to be difficult. So that is the impression, because that is the impression that strong wording, as you say, in the CIA, I think, gives. And I think Ajaz was absolutely right in his summary of it. And if you're looking for evidence, maybe not look, I mean, it is, well, partially look at the evidence of the decision-making process, that seems to hold up. But how many decisions did you never take because they never came? And what's the impression that that is having? If you look round, you will see plenty of restaurants that sell nice wine and beer. That sounds good. But what about places where people younger, like Ajaz and I, in past times perhaps, went to and things like that? And a connection here is just thinking through how a premises works. So I talked about music venues. We all know, any of us who are interested in music venues, not just in Oxford, but also disintegrating. I mean, we're losing dozens every month across the country. One of the factors there is that the actual putting on, this is still answering the question, putting on music directly, the actual music performance isn't massively profitable. You then have to do something else with your venue in order to make the money to cover it. Traditionally, that's live performance. That audience leaves having paid, bought a few drinks, then another audience come in to the club that runs till 3 and 4 in the morning, and that is what makes it work. And if you don't have the club bit, you don't have the other bit either.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hollingsworth. Okay, we have a number of questions. I think it was Councillor Taylor, and we've got on this side, I think we've got 2. We've also got Councillor Jupp and Councillor Mundy in the list who want to speak. I'd like to say something as well. So, Councillor Taylor, please. Thank you.
So Alex has sort of answered what I was going to ask, but I was worried that there was a slight survivorship bias in the data, in that what we were looking at were only people that applied, and I'd just like to give the council officers a chance to respond on whether or not the policy might actually be the discouraging people to apply, not people who would actually qualify under the policy, but just think the council would be difficult as a result of it, and obviously people who wouldn't qualify under the policy because they wouldn't be able to make their business profitable as a result.
Could I just ask that we take the other questions and then you answer them all together, just because I think otherwise we're going to, so then on this side we had, sorry if I'm getting the order wrong, was it Councillor Liger and then Councillor, okay, Councillor Clarkson, please.
Thanks. I was going to make a point, which is a comment rather than a question, and that was about the context. And we have seen nightclubs closing across the country. So I just think, while I agree that we probably do need to review our cumulative impact assessment, nevertheless, there are a number of reasons, largely economic, why nightclubs have been closing across the country, and that will be in towns and cities which do not have a CIA as well. So we just need to bear that in mind when we review it, that if places aren't opening or are closing, it's not necessarily due to the CIA being there.
Thank you. And on this side we had, was it Councillor, no, we had Councillor Mundy and Councillor Jupp as well. So if you could make your 2 interventions and then we'll come back to Joshua.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so I think it's obviously really important to recognise that we're here to uphold the licensing objectives and to support a thriving nighttime economy, which we all know that. So what I was just wanted to kind of get an idea of from officers was, you know, it may well be that this policy is absolutely appropriate as it stands at this day, as it was 20 years ago. But what would necessitate a reconsideration of the need for this policy? And does it hinge entirely on the representations of the statutory bodies that we need to take account of, the police and the fire service? And if so, you know, are we sort of recognising their own resourcing needs and how that might impact the problems that there might be in managing the nighttime economy? And in light of that, is there an understanding that the weekend is really always going to be an unbalanced impact on the need to maintain a secure environment? Because it's obviously going to be different to other days of the week. I think, you know, in light of what Alex has obviously come here to say, and I think it is somewhat outside the actual policy itself, but it is definitely coming out from the committee that, you know, we are really concerned about protecting the variety of venues that we have. And, you know, perhaps it's not appropriate for it to be within the CIA policy and the SSP policy. But, you know, are we in danger of having, you know, venues that sort of serve big red wines and cheeseburgers doing really well and not closing because they have a successful model, and then places that sell real ale and live music just close and they don't get the opportunity to reopen, and as we've said, potentially being put off by the policy as far as taking that risk to reopen those kind of premises. Also, just this is my last point, in relation to the actual the report itself and the survey that was undertaken is often the case where we look at surveys and you see a really, really small number of responses, appreciating that is a relatively dry topic for most people, but I would hope to see more than 33 people responding to a survey like this. I just wonder whether there's been enough of an effort to gather the views of all sorts of people who've been impacted by this. We've got the chair and the secretary of culture actually sitting in the public gallery. You know, obviously taxi drivers are impacted by the drop in the number of licensed venues. So we're not going to get more responses to this because obviously it's here now, but I'd really want to see this getting broader, given that we're putting so much weight on the response from the police and the fire department. I'd really like to see a greater response from the public. Thank you.
Okay, and we've just got the comment from Councillor Jubb, and then we'll turn back to you, Councillor Kenno. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question, Councillor Harnsworth. You've made throughout all of your interventions what are to my ears quite convincing arguments for just doing away with the CIA and the SSP. And so I'd like you to expand on why you think deferring isn't just kicking the can down the road and prolonging negative effects that arise as a result of this policy, and why we shouldn't just vote to scrap it.
My view was that some of the fundamental word, so it was quoted both by me and by the officers. It's in that paragraph 4 of your report, is the bit which I think is problematic, and that's the CIA from which the SPP, let me get my initials right, the SPP is drawn. So I don't necessarily think it is a bad thing to have an SPP. What worries me is that wording of the CIA and what that then leads to. So, as I said, at a time, early 2000s, when Walkabout was for those of you of a certain age, that was the application which really set off alarm bells, you know, that place. As it's drafted, it sounds as if we've got enough. One goes, it's always going to be replaced. And what we're actually seeing, yes, with restaurants, that always seems to be okay. You know, restaurant goes under, didn't really work out, customers move on, another one opens or something like that. It is certain other sorts of venues. And there may be factors, as Councillor Clarkson said, which are outside our control. We know that. But there are other things which might be within our control. So I'm not pushing necessarily, so it's up to you, I believe, if that's the legal advice, I think. You get to decide, not me. But my view is just pausing to just have a look at some of this detailed wording that it's drawn from, and just, are we sending a positive message or are we sending a negative message? And that was the issue that I was concerned about. If you end up ditching it as a result, then that is fine by me. But equally, if you keep it unamended, ditto. Entirely your decision. Just wanted to have this opportunity to come along and say something.
Okay, thank you. And maybe actually, Joshua, just so that you can answer all of these questions together, because I think it's important to make representation here for one of the other licensing objectives, which is around protecting the public. And whilst it's not a declaration of interest, I do live quite near this cumulative impact area of East Oxford. So I am resident near, and I do know firsthand the negative impact that very many closely concentrated venues can have on local residents, and how it has felt increasingly worse over the decade that I have lived there. And the council has abolished its noise reporting service, for instance, which means that if you have got Parkinson's disease, for instance, or which I know a resident nearby, or you're in the sheltered accommodation, it means in the middle of the night, when that noise that you don't know where it's coming from, which of the pubs, I won't name them, but some of them do not have appropriate noise insulation. It means that someone has to leave the house in the middle of the night and go and identify which venue that has come from, or figure out an app online to record the noise of an unknown location. And I know that if you're by yourself and you have young children at home at the time when that is happening, you can't do that. I know that, you know, and if you're disabled, you're unable to do that. So there are negative impacts on that, on the local residents, and we've got to also protect the public. there is, from my personal view, having sat through many of these licence decisions, we haven't been turning down licences on the basis of this. In fact, there seems to be more pubs and venues, certainly in the East Oxford area, notwithstanding the economic conditions that are facing certain sectors of the economy. What we have heard, which Councillor Hollingsworth has mentioned, is that there are changing business models perhaps, and maybe there is a piece of work that we could look at, which is how can we support our licensing objectives and support the nighttime economy whilst not having a negative impact on residents through a detailed piece of work on that the clubs sector, because that seems to be a subsector, which is what you're referring to. So my question to you, to officers, is on this, taking into account all of these different points that we've heard. Is it at this stage possible to make a small text edit to the document that we could put a motion down today to soften some of the language in the paragraph that Councillor Hollingsworth has mentioned is concerning? And secondly, if we were to approve this, could we do a parallel piece of work and commission that on the basis of today's meeting and put forward a motion and recommend that a piece of work is undertaken to look at the clubs and the promoting the nighttime economy to support them, bearing in mind economic factors and the changing business models? Is that an option that we could put before us so that we're not left without a special saturation policy, which is being recommended to us by the police and the fire service at a time when they're stretched, and we don't want to remove this necessarily in the interim, because as I understood it, we would otherwise be in a limbo where we would have none of this until if we don't pass it today, until we come up with an alternative, which is at the next meeting. Okay, and legal advice, sorry, on this.
Well, I'm sure Joshua's got his answers prepared. It's just that could I speak to maybe the options and how to move forward?
Thank you, that would be good. Thank you. So Joshua, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I will try to move through those in the order in which they came. Councillor Taylor was first. You asked for comment on the statement of what about those that didn't apply? What about the impact on those that saw the policy and decided not to? The comment on that is, it's up to you. You as the councillors, as the representatives of the local area, are the ones that will be in a better position to answer that. We've not received any a cumulative impact assessment, and special saturation policy specifically is very much set in legislation and guidance, and how we set it out and how we get evidence for it is given to us. I don't have evidence of someone who has not applied because they saw it, and it's incredibly unlikely that evidence I would be able to gather that. Therefore, I can't present it in a report. However, it is something that you can potentially assume. It's a fair assumption to make that if there's a restrictive policy in place, that some people may be put off by that policy. And so the answer is, it's up to you. It's the committee who decides this policy at the end of the day. If you feel that outweighs what you have in front of you and you want to go a different way, legal will provide the answers for what other options you have. But it's on you. I'm not one to provide that answer. I can only provide what we're able to provide, essentially. Councillor Mundy, you made a few points and asked a few questions. What would necessitate the need for this policy, or essentially what would be significant enough for us not to have it, I guess is what you're asking. Again, it's up to you. This policy is, there's been a comment that this policy came about 20 years ago and hasn't changed. That's absolutely incorrect. This policy is reviewed on a statutory timeline every 3 years, and every time it's renewed, that is the date that policy has been decided as being relevant. If today you decide anything different about this policy, today is when this policy will be different from, or the same, or however we adopt it. You'll see the cumulative impact assessments going back are not the same data. Sometimes there's more data, sometimes there's less. We can only use what we're able to get. And unfortunately, I think that was your next point, Councillor Mundy, was about the consultation and the lack of responses and the limited amount of information potentially that we have to go off. We go as far as we can to get a consultation in the hands of as many relevant people as possible. I know that every single license holder in Oxford was sent a copy of this consultation. Every relevant body connected to licensing was sent a copy of this representation. But you'll see even we have something like 11 or 12 responsible authorities who are legally obliged to have an interest in licensing, and we still only received, I think, 3 responses from the responsible authorities. Licensing is dry to those that aren't in the licensing world. It's difficult to show how a policy decision will impact someone so much that they should respond, particularly when a lot of the consultation is, this is what we're doing, we're trying to gather evidence, what do you think about this? It's not an officer saying, I absolutely think we should have a policy in place. It's, we're looking at this, we're reviewing this, please give us your comments. And so it's understandable, I think, that people may be less likely to respond because it doesn't say, there's a policy decision, we think this is going to happen, this is what will be our decision, and this is how it will impact you. So about the consultation, every time we have a consultation, we try to get it in as many hands as possible. That's why we do a long, this was a 9-week consultation. That's 3 weeks longer than the standard consultation, I think, just simply to try and get as much back as possible. And it wasn't until the very end of that 9-week consultation that we even had anything significant from the police necessarily. It's difficult to get that information, and we can only get what we can get essentially, which I guess then does add comment to Councillor Hollingsworth's questions or comments about the if it was deferred and if you were to go out to get more evidence. I would say from a officer point of view, the evidence we have is everything we could get. There's always more analysis that could be done, but we asked for that information. The things that are being raised, we want that information, but sometimes we don't get it when we ask for it, and we have no authority to force others to give us more detail. In some years, we get better data. I know one year we had public health give us an incredibly robust detail. Public was which question? Sorry, it was your onto your question. Yes, thank you. So, is it first? The first thing you said, is it possible to make text edits? I think that's Ali will cover that. Parallel work on promoting the nighttime economy. If you can give more detail about what you'd like that to look like, of course, there's always things that can be put forward. I don't think it would be necessarily relevant to the policy. This policy is the way in which Oxford City has tried to manage the issues, or one of the ways we've tried to manage the issues. The legislation allows you to do it, the guidance is set out about how it's to be done, and it's the way that Oxford City has done so. I really can't comment on the fact that if the committee today disagree with that or want to change that or want to make it more robust, that's completely up to the committee. I don't have a biased view necessarily on this. It is the committee who'd make this decision. And if you think this is appropriate to uphold the licensing objectives, then it should be in place. If you think it's not appropriate to uphold the licensing objectives, then not necessarily the case. May I comment on the strong language thing because that may be relevant to the text. The language, we have to use it that way because that's what the statutory guidance says we have to say. If we're using a cumulative impact assessment to have a special saturation policy, that statement, that is the very strong one, is given to us from the Secretary of State. That is what you have to agree. And so editing that statement to soften it, you can't edit the statement to soften it. That's what it is. Are there other ways to manage the nighttime economy and to reduce these issues? Potentially and absolutely, and different areas do it different ways. And if you'd like to discuss those, please do
Thank you very much, Joshua, for all of that feedback. Over to Alison Daly, who is our legal services and will advise us on this.
So just to clarify, I'm sure you're all aware, of course you are, but just to clarify that actually tonight, you as a committee you're considering the recommendation before you that's in the report. And then if you did support a policy, it would then go forward to full council, who would be the ones to adopt the policy. So you are a decision-making body, but your decision tonight is whether or not you agree with it such that it should go forward as a recommendation to full council. You would have to consider the recommendation that's before you and vote upon it. If it doesn't succeed, there would have to be another recommendation drafted, put forwarded, and a motion tabled and seconded and voted upon. I wanted to sort of remind everybody that it's best practice that if you consider that all relevant matters are here before you in this report and that you have sufficient to make a decision, you should do so. If you feel that you don't have all relevant information or matters, that would be a reason to defer your decision, that you're not able to reach a decision whether you approve this to go forward to full council or not. But it would be best practice as well to be clear about what's missing, what needs to be found, or what your instructions or your questions really to officers are. So the pieces of work would need to be clarified so that officers, if they're doing work, to bring it back to the committee, that would need to be really clear. So basically, if you do decide to defer your decision, it needs to be reasoned. Those reasons need to be clear, and there should be questions for the officers to work on. It would then need to come, if you defer your decision, it does need to come back to this full committee again before the next full council. There's a timeline. Jonathan can tell you that timeline. It's quite tight. If it didn't come back before that full council, you'd be looking at a much longer period of time. There's one option, which is you vote that the policy should be in place this evening, but that you want further work to be done and to come back to the committee at a later date before full council or after full council. So basically you're reserving the right to, once further information has been found, bring it back for a further review. However, I'm told by the licensing officers that the policy, if you agreed it, is for 3 years, but you would be putting a date in place for it to come back before you for a much earlier review than 3 years' time. I think those are all the options. Are there anything else, Jonathan? So,
thank you. Okay. So what we've heard from our legal advice is that I think at the first instance, we just need to decide whether we're happy with what's before us and to recommend. If we're not, depending on that vote, then that's when we come to clarifying the reasoned, clear arguments and questions that need to be answered for if we are to not do that.
sorry, I just wanted to clarify that with regard to paragraph 4 and the wording, of course, if you want to invite the officer to amend the wording, that's okay, but you're not actually voting to recommend the report. It's the recommendation itself that you're voting on. So tweaking the wording of paragraph 4 as per Councillor Hollingsworth's request is probably doesn't have an impact. However, it could be tweaked if it felt it wasn't had an impact.
That's very, very helpful. Okay, so I've got a few hands here and I'm not sure which order because I'm seeing them all simultaneously. Are these questions on the process, just to clarify? Yeah, okay. And I think we've got 2 questions over here. So, and if you can put your questions to our legal advisor on this, please.
Good evening. Knows the implications on the timeline. I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit, depending on what decision we make, and does it have to come to the next full council?
Preferably it would, in which case it's quite timeline. If it wasn't able to reach that one, it would be the next one. Jonathan has the dates. He's researched them in advance.
So if you wanted to get this through the next full council, which is scheduled for the 14th of July, the agenda will be published on the 4th of July. So any work and any recommendations for the 2 full council would need to be done before then. If you were going to take it, so that would mean a special meeting would need to be organised. If you wanted to take it to the following meeting, which is due in the beginning of October, there is a Licensing and Gambling Act committee scheduled for September. So an update to this policy could be brought to said meeting. So your options are, how quickly do you want it? And if you do, then obviously if it's immediate, we will need to reconvene this committee and all the work would need to be done, by the licensing officers and obviously with my team.
And just to clarify, that would mean, because it currently stands that we therefore don't have a special saturation policy, which means if there's any new pub, club, nightclub in the city centre or on the Cowley Road area of there where these conditions, extra conditions don't apply, so they wouldn't have to come to committee, is that correct? Subcommittee?
Well, there's two options. You can vote that you have the policy comes into effect, but that you reconvene, that work is done and you meet and then make a further recommendation and that either amend your recommendation. So you could recommend it, but review that and then change your recommendation to council. Or you could say we don't recommend to full council a saturation policy. If the policy is not in place, is not adopted until ratified by full council. So that is really the key time, obviously. Without a policy in place, as I think Joshua explained, is that applications still come to the council and they're considered in the first instance by officers if there's insufficient information, or perhaps most often it's because a venue has not responded or communicated, then it comes before the subcommittee. At the subcommittee, the merits of the individual application are thoroughly considered, that the applicant has a chance to make representations. The nature of the area is a consideration, the impact on the area, and then really the scrutiny is on how the venue proposes to deal with that impact. Most often it's best by agreeing conditions attached to the licence, and that's the process. Whilst there's no policy in place, in effect, a subcommittee can choose to adopt those policy, the kind of principles of it, which is what is the area, what is the impact, how is this venue going to deal with that impact? And that's really something that is part of the normal decision making of any application of a venue.
You had a question, Councillor Mudderman, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My understanding of the comments from our officers is that we can't amend paragraph 4, which is the strong wording, because that's legally required. So we can't do that and still have an SSP, is my understanding. So is that, have I got that right? It seems to me a bit more black and white, a bit more binary, that actually it's very difficult for us to tweak this policy, and that we're actually looking at, if we wanted to do what is being suggested, we'd actually be looking more at scrapping it rather than, have I misunderstood that? Sorry, your faces are making me think I'm really stupid.
Well, no, I'm sorry, that's, I have to adjust my face, definitely. I didn't mean it to do that at all. I think Joshua and I are looking at who's best to answer, but it'd be great if you could answer, Josh.
It's a good question, Councillor. I think you're right. I think if you were of the opinion that the statement where we say essentially that the council is of the opinion that the addition of any more licensed premises will have a negative impact on our ability to uphold the licensing objectives, something like that. If you disagree with that statement, then I think you can't put a special saturation policy in place by using the cumulative impact assessment system. I will, try not to go beyond the question too much, say that does not mean you cannot consider cumulative impact on any application. All applications are case by case. If an application is in an area where there is a known cumulative impact issue, and if there's an objection to that application that evidences that, say for example, in an area on Banbury Road where there is no SSP, if an application came up, police could still object in their role of responsible authority and lead for crime and disorder, and they could say, this application has been received on this particular road. This road has a high cumulative impact issue. We're worried about the crime and disorder, about the introduction of this particular premises coming. Therefore, we disagree with what's being applied for, either the hours or the lack of conditions or so forth. And the committee will still consider that and apply your discretion under the Licensing Act to make a decision on that license. You don't need the SSP in place for that process to still happen. What the SSP does is it removes the assumption that if there are no objections, this license will just be granted, which is how it exists elsewhere. If I currently apply for a license anywhere and I don't fill out the operating schedule to give any proposed conditions, I don't want to, all I say is I want to open this pub this time, and that's it. If no one objects to it, including any responsible authorities, licensing authority, anyone, then that license will just be granted. There is no question asked. The SSP reverses that presumption, and people should assume that if I'm applying for it in this area, it's not going to just be granted. You have to go through this process.
And just on that point, because I'll come back to, so at the moment, with the Cowley Road example, for instance, because often people say, you know, with the terminology saturation, it is saturated. There are just too many pubs and, you know, too many bars. There's nothing else. Where's the gift shop? Where's the, you know, bookshop? It's around whether it's saturated or not. So the assumption that you've just clarified is that if this doesn't exist anymore, then, you know, the whole street without, you know, could, and the same with the city centre, everything could be turned into a pub or a club if people applied without any questioning that. Is that okay? So please,
Thank you for that explanation. I was just going to suggest, and this might be a bit too early, but I'm going to put it on the table, that given the agenda, and what we're being asked to do, whether to approve this or not approve it now, I don't feel that we're in a position where we want to make a decision about scrapping it, you know, that because the request was to tweak it rather than scrap it. I don't think tweaking is feasible from what officers said. So if it's about scrapping it, I think that should absolutely be deferred to a later. That's another piece of work for another meeting, which I'm very happy to have and very happy to discuss. But I would suggest that we approve this for now so that we retain the policy and then come back and revisit whether we just want to, if you want to continue, then we look at whether we want to scrap the policy, which is a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Councillor, Madam, if you, should it be that the committee agree to approve the recommendation, the policy, it goes forward to full council, who, let's say, so then the committee would be able to set a timetable for itself, whether or not they wish to meet before the next full council, which would be ahead of the potential, you know, ratifying adoption of the policy, or whether they are content for it to go to full council, a decision to be made, the policy to come into effect. They would reconvene in October, which date is already set for, and go through the process.
Can I just suggest that, because at the moment, a lot of this is hypothetical on the other options, could we just have can I move a motion that we have the vote on whether we approve to recommend this to council or not, and then discuss, if we haven't, based on what Ali has suggested, then what our next steps are going to be? Yeah, does someone second that? Okay, thank you. So should we just take a vote, all those in favour of, and just clarify what the wording of this is? It is to agree, we agree to the recommendation to full council, the adoption of this document before us, which is the cumulative impact assessment for 25 to 28 and continued special saturation policy. So if we vote on this first, all those in favour raise their hands, and then we'll see whether it falls. And if it falls, then we discuss then the next steps. So all those in favour of recommending to council of adopting this policy, please. Five. Okay. All of those against it. Okay. Anyone abstain? Okay, so this means that it's not recommended to council. So now that means we're not having a hypothetical discussion anymore. Okay, so is our next step? So to our legal advice, our next steps are we've got two options around working for the July meeting or October meeting.
Yes, I mean, it's not going to be recommended for council. It would, you can set yourself a timetable for when you would like further work from and be specific about the further work from the council officers, or that could just be the end of it. It is
Oh, dear.
entirely up to you.
Okay, I'm sorry. No, let's stick with the committee here,
Thank
please.
you.
So yeah. Are you, yeah? Yeah,
Councillor
just,
Hollingsworth, sorry, just to
yeah.
interrupt, it is at your discretion whether Councillor
Yeah.
Hollingsworth is here to
I'd
give an
like to hear
address.
from the members first. Okay, thank you. So so the question is, so we've got July is probably not feasible. So we're talking about bringing something, a revised version for the September meeting of this committee to be able to take to the October meeting of full council. So this means that at the moment, there's a presumption that any applicant basically doesn't have to apply any of these extra conditions, which goes against what the police have recommended us adopting, and it goes against what the fire service have. So that's so what is it then? Because we've got to provide a clear view as to why we have as a group now said that we don't want this, and provide questions that the officers need to answer to bring this to our September meeting if we're going to amend it or if we're going to do anything else to it. So we've got a few hands on this side. Yeah, Councillor Jupp, we'll go round down the line and we'll take your, yeah.
Perhaps in order to save time, could we not have a vote now to decide whether we even continue with trying to workshop something or make the policy work? That's all.
Are you moving a motion to that effect?
Yes.
Have you got a seconder? Okay, we've got a seconder for Councillor Taylor for that. So, so the motion before us is whether or not.
Yeah, can we just have clarity about what we're voting on, what this actually means?
Yeah, this is what, yeah. So, yeah, excuse me, this is exactly what we're trying to clarify. So that what Councillor Jupp has just put before us is the just clarifying, would you like to put your wording for your motion?
I'll reword
Just
it.
reword it.
Essentially, I'm asking whether I'd like us to vote on whether we keep trying to, we bring this back to future meetings basically to try and come up with an alternative policy that works and can be voted on, or whether we just give up and don't.
Okay.
At all.
And we're just getting, yeah.
Greatest of respect, that's not a motion, that's a kind of choice. So if you don't mind, if you don't mind rephrasing it in a one way or the other so that it can be voted on.
Absolutely, sorry about that. That makes perfect sense. So motion is that this committee should abandon future, for now, stop attempts at making the policy work and bringing it back to future meetings of LGA.
So just to clarify, what if you support this, the motion that Councillor Jupp is putting forward, you're essentially supporting the removal of.
I was trying not to use the word scrap, but yes.
Kill the policy, basically, until the next.
Okay. Okay. This is a point of order then to please to the legal.
This is it, we can accept recommendations with specific proposals that I'd like to join. Is this the last of your hands? No, that's just one.
So that's just one option. Legal.
There can be further motions put forward, but obviously, and then we put forward and seconded and voted upon.
Okay, so can we take them simultaneously? We have to do them in the order that this has just gone.
Order that they received, I'm told, by the committee services.
Okay, so because this is the first motion that's been put, which is the scrap it, was that how you framed it? So it's a simple, do we support continuing with a special saturation policy, full stop. And the motion that councillor Jupp has put is that he is supporting. So if you support his motion, you are supporting removing the future policy of a special saturation zone. Is that?
I think the motion is that there should be no further work in the,
No further work.
no further work instructed to the council, to the officers in terms of no further consultation, no further cumulative impact assessments, no further research. As this committee would be instructing, so that you're not requesting it as a committee of the officers, I think.
Okay, point of order.
Separate decision 5 minutes later, didn't we? Is that meaningful proposals?
No, the officers, you know, you can't restrict, you're unable, I think, to restrict research by the officers who may then have enough research that supports a further report to the committee. But what I think councillor Jupp is proposing is that there's no immediate further work that is brought back before the committee, before the next council.
Yeah, so far in what we've been discussing, there's been a presumption in favour of our trying to make the SSP work and you know, having the officers do further research and maybe discuss proposals at future meetings of LGA. The purpose of the motion is essentially to question whether we even ought to do that. And you know, that there may be strong opinions on either side, but either way, it gives us a choice as to whether to continue with it or not. Unless the officers, having done further research or you know, got alternative data, suggest something else.
So, okay, just to clarify, so if you support the motion that councillor Jupp has put forward, then there is no further work on this. The recommendation that goes to full council is that we have not recommended approving it. Therefore, that means there would be no special saturation policy. Bearing in mind, whilst we've made this decision at the moment to, you know, the majority made the decision about not supporting the recommendation to council, the responsible authorities did ask us to support it. So so just bear that in mind in your decision. And then I think we have to take the vote now. So we take the vote. Is that, yeah? So
can I just check we had a seconder before we actually voted?
You did have, it was seconded. It was seconded by councillor Taylor. So.
And I thought I could just share with the committee that the advice from Jonathan is that because of the nature of the motion, that there should be no further work, and that basically the rejection of the report and the recommendation to council is quashed. That would be the decision of the committee. So further motions would seem contradictory.
Yeah. Okay, was that point of order?
Clarification,
Point of
yes,
order.
just so that I'm sure for the vote. So would that decision by this committee still have to be ratified by full council? No, it would stand.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. And so we'd effectively be voting to scrap the SSP. Okay, that's clear, thank you. And the second clarification was if councillor Jupp's motion were to fail, which I have to say, I hope it does, but if it were to fail, then the current situation is that we're not recommending, because we've already had that vote, we're not recommending this to full council at present. And so at the moment, are we in some sort of, but we're not saying we're not going to come back and look at it again. So are we in a sort of, where do we stand? Do we have an SSP?
No, we don't.
At the current moment, we don't have one. But if councillor Jupp's motion was, we're agreeing, we don't want to come back and have a look at that and decide that actually we do want one in the future. That's really what, so we don't have one. If councillor Jupp's motion passes, we're saying we're not going to come back and ever look at this again.
If councillor Jupp's motion fails, there could be further motions put forward. It's the nature of the motion, which is saying we don't want any further work. It's not, like I say, the officers will go about their work and they will be looking at the impacts and so on. That's the nature of their work. So you wouldn't be stopping a future report ever coming back to the committee. It's just that you're saying you are not going to instruct them to carry out further work, which you would like to come back before this committee. There is no, the policy is not in place, it's expired. And in fact, we've had meetings this week and it's been made clear in the meetings to members and to applicants that the policy has expired and is not in place. So it is not in place, but it doesn't, and you have an opportunity to direct officers for further work and bring it back if councillor Jupp's motion works, is voted upon and agreed. That is what you're saying to the councillors. We're not instructing you to carry out further work. However, they may come back in a year's time when with another cumulative impact assessment, perhaps, which again, you would have to consider the contents of it. Are you persuaded by the findings of it? This policy is evidence-based. You look at the evidence, so they could come back with further evidence at a future point. It's just that this motion is saying we're not instructing officers tonight to go away and do specific work. If councillor Jupp's motion fails, like I say, we can move forward with other motions.
And can I just clarify, there is a standard framework that officers have to follow to create this, which is set out in national law. Is that correct?
Absolutely, that's right, isn't it, Josh? Yeah, when they gather evidence, they have to gather it in a particular way. And that's set out in guidance.
Thank you. So just before we make this vote, I'm going to use the chair's prerogative to just think about some of the licence objectives that we have before us, which also includes protecting the public. And we also want to promote the economy of Oxford. But what we could be doing by scrapping this is having a situation where, you know, basically the whole of the Cowley Road or the whole of the city centre is just bars, because there's not this policy, which at the moment doesn't have that automatic assumption that you can just everything can become a pub or a nightclub, which is what has been set out by officers, that it doesn't stop everywhere becoming a club or a pub or anything that's set out within this policy, but it's just as a presumption that with the policy as it stands, that it's not, there's not the automatic assumption that everything can be granted a licence. Okay, councillor Cox.
I'd just say that if it was a change of use, then there would be a separate planning application anyway. So that, you know, you'd have to decide whether, if there were, you know, lots of applications for everywhere in Cowley Road or city centre to become a pub or a club, we'd have to deal with that. And I suspect they probably wouldn't all get passed for a variety of other reasons.
Okay, so we take our vote. So all those in favour of councillor Jupp's motion, raise their hands, please. 2. Thank you. All those who are voting against councillor Jupp's motion, thank you. And any abstentions, please? No. Okay, so councillor Jupp's motion has fallen. So now, thank you. We know that we've got 2 points here. Who raised their hand first? Okay, we'll take these points, but we might have to revert to, actually, could I just ask Councillor Herzog, our legal advisor, just to clarify the process, and then we take your comments, if you may.
You're unable to move on from this item, and bear in mind there is another
meeting,
another agenda. You can't move on until you have made a decision, so you should invite further motions which would be voted upon.
Okay, thank you very much.
One at a time, obviously.
Yeah, thank you. So we need further motions to provide our reason clear argument as to why we are not recommending and what the next steps are. I've got 3 points. Yeah.
Shouldn't we adjourn? That'd be unlawful, but that's.
No, I'm just saying, while we ironed out some of these legalities, I'm just conscious this is live and going out and,
This is the purpose of the meeting, and so we have the legal officer with us to provide that on an ongoing basis throughout. So we've got 2 points in now here. So Councillor Raymond and Councillor Ortino, if you make your points, and we've also got, you can put forward a motion as well as to what the next steps are.
Thank you, Chair. So to me, it's quite clear that this policy is outdated. So the reasons for refusing it, in my opinion, is that it's outdated. It doesn't include what I would like it to include, or hopefully we can all vote on that. It's apparent from comments today that Cowley Road is now totally different to the city centre. So my motion would be that we would ask the officers to include the Westgate in the CIA for the city centre and have a separate policy for Cowley Road, because they're two different types of residential areas now. So that the policy that's works in the city centre doesn't work for Cowley Road. So my motion would be, I guess I'll try to make it shorter, that we should include all of the city centre, including the Westgate, and have a CIA policy for that, and we should have a separate policy for Cowley Road, because the dynamics have changed over the last 20 years, and hence that's why we've refused the recommendation of the officers.
Okay. So, because it's framed as a motion, we have to ask for a seconder. You've provided a rationale, but you've pointed.
We can get to add things to that afterwards. I would support that, but I've got more suggestions than that. Is this going to be it, or are we going to add what we actually want to see in the report?
Okay, what we're going, okay. So we just a clarification on process. So whilst you put forward the motion, we're opening debate on the topic for the reason clear questions. So we'll take the comments that you've made just now, Councillor Renan, as debate, and then once we've heard from the others on views related to this reasons for why we're refusing, then we'll formulate come back to the recommendation that you put forward, but with the other views in. Councillor Ortino, please.
Yeah, I was going to propose pretty much what AJ has said, but I think what the additional evidence I want to see, because I do see these as two different areas. I see the Cowley Road doesn't look like it's got much capacity for very much more, and therefore the saturation policy might be applicable. But I'm sure we are all worried about the city centre, what's happening to the city centre. We've got shops closing. We know that's because people are buying everything online and whatever. We know there's a danger that our city centres become more and more empty. And these are the things that might fill that spaces to give life back to our city centre. We know that live music pretty much doesn't happen in Oxford. We know that there are very few nightclubs. In the area of the city that I represent, there have been stabbings recently, and people were saying to me it's because kids have got nothing to do. We've got to put things on in Blackbird Leys, but some of the things they could be doing are in the city centre. And if they've got nothing to do, they'll be taking Class A drugs and getting involved in county lines, and that's the sort of thing that happens. So I think we need to see the two places separately. But the additional information I want in the report is information about the number of premises in each of these parts of the city and how they've declined over a 10-year period, particularly premises where live music, we're giving a license to perform live music, but also premises where we've got giving a license for dancing, for nightclubs essentially. So that's the sort of information that I have. I would like to see, because I think that might make me make a different decision about the city centre than about Cowley Road, where I don't see that decline. If that's possible. I would have liked to have asked if that was possible earlier, but I didn't get a chance to speak. And I also would like to see evidence about police numbers on the streets in Oxford, because I am really worried that we are making decisions, we're being forced to make decisions by the local police commission not investing in keeping our city centre safe, is investing his resources elsewhere. And there's a danger that we're just going to have hardly any police and just bars and clubs where we're forcing them to have security guards who are not, we're privatising the police force basically. So I want that information, and I want us to be clear that we're not making a decision because the police are saying we can't resource it. They can resource it. They can make a choice about where they put their resources. So I'd like that information as well. So yeah, data about long-term, the decline of live music and nightclubs. And I'd also like to know if would we be able to have a saturation policy that had one thing for sort of bars and another thing for nightclubs and live music? Would we be able to say we're not saturated for live music venues? We're maybe not quite saturated for nightclubs, but we are saturated for other sort of, is that possible? And if it was, that's the sort of thing I'd like you to research and come back and tell you, yeah, maybe you don't know now. So that's my, I hope we got the gist of that.
Just in terms of process, I think we're still debating this, but this is a potential amendment to the motion that AJAS has put forward, and so it will be taken as feedback together. So, I think we also have to check the feasibility of the information request from officers. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if I just summarise it, I think you were wanting to add to, so Councillor Rahman's motion is that there would be a cumulative impact assessment taken for the city centre, which included the West Gate, and then there would be a separate cumulative impact assessment, of course, and there would be consultations on both, and that therefore, this is not, what the result of your motion would be that this would then be presented in a report and come back for the committee. And I think that Councillor Artino is requesting that there is evidence specifically gathered on police numbers in both areas, city centre and Cowley Road, and then you would also want to know, is there a possibility to exclude certain types of venue? And you specifically mentioned music venues.
And I'd like data on.
You'd like data, right? Okay, so Josh, is that feasible to get that?
Please.
Thank you.
I will try. Can we have data about the number of premises and has there been a decline or increase? Yes. We can pull that data physically from the number of issued licenses and hopefully some clever work with our database to do some backwards tracking. I would say as a comment, I think the numbers are more now than they were 20 years ago. Or 10 years ago. The numbers of licenses have not decreased despite the number of venues potentially closing. Because even if a venue is shut, it may still retain a license. So that's something that is worth noting. Licenses not in use are still in existence and can be used at any point. Can we distinguish the different types of licenses as you're defining them, as in live music or nightclub versus pub, so forth? Much more difficult, because premises are not defined like that under legislation. How premises are defined under the Licensing Act is the activities that they permit. So the sale of alcohol, late night refreshment, regulated entertainment, or supply of alcohol to a members club. So we could show the premises that have different types of licensable activities, but that does not necessarily correlate to the kind of premises as you're describing it. It's regulated entertainment, but much of live music is actually deregulated and does not require a license if there's a premises in place, if it finishes before 2300 hours, if it's an audience of less than 500. There's many rules around it that simply mean to define it as you are would be much more of a physical body going down the road, counting the premises based on a description you have given, rather than using the stats we have and the licenses we have, because there is no definition that splits them in any particular way. A pub is the same as a nightclub under licensing law. The differences are when they operate and what activities they permit.
Can you just clarify how does that interact with the temporary events notices as well? Because does that also relate to it?
It doesn't interact with that. A temporary event notice can be applied for anywhere at any time for a set amount of time, but a temporary event notice basically permits one of the licensable activities that if you want to do permanently, you would need something like a premises license to permit. With a temporary event notice in the name, a temporary licensing of that thing. Sorry, should I move on to the police on the streets part? Sure. If you get that, go ahead. If we can obtain that information, it's absolutely something that could go into a report, into a CIA.
You'd be in the position of requesting that from the police.
Yes, exactly. I would ask the police, and what we get back is what we get back for that. Could we have a separate policy for bars and clubs, but not live music venues? Again, no, simply because the legislation does not define those places differently. And this type of policy that you're talking about now is a very rigid policy from legislation and set out very clearly in guidance. Could you have a policy distinguishing those? Absolutely. We have a statement of licensing policy in which we have lots and lots and lots of different things in that policy. For example, about our expectations on limiting, stopping venues, or venues having things in place to stop spiking. We have a policy on that we all agree is relevant, and premises of a certain type should have conditions to make sure they uphold that. So you could have a policy that's still related to cumulative impact or crime and disorder, but it would not be this policy under this same legislation and same guidance. It would be something of your own creation that's adopted in our own policy, I guess. If that's correct, Ali, sorry, let me know if I've said something wrong there.
Oh, I think it's a question of whether or not there would be a policy that has this rebuttable presumption that licenses within this specific geographic area, either the city centre or Cowley Road, would be refused unless there was evidence to show that the impact was mitigated through the operating schedule. Could you there say that policy applies in this geographical area, except it does not apply to a venue where there's regulated entertainment music after 11 o'clock? I mean, is that feasible within the legislation?
No,
I don't think it is.
this policy, in the way it operates, cannot operate in that way. You can't distinguish the different places. It's either all in or not at all with this particular policy.
Okay, thank you. We've got two further comments. We've got Councillor Madiman, and then we have got, and this is the debate of what our reasons are for having rejected, and we've got Councillor Sanderson. But first of all, Councillor and Councillor Ligo as well. Thank you. So you three, and then I think we might need to be drawing this to a close, I'm afraid, and voting on an amended motion maybe. Please, Councillor Madiman.
Thank you. I had a suggestion. I think what's happened here tonight was certainly an unintended consequence of what Councillor Hollingsworth brought to the table. I think perhaps there was a little bit confusion over the very first vote, and the fact that that would lead to us actually effectively scrapping our special saturation policy, which is what we have now done. I completely hear in the room that there's an appetite to review and to come back and look again. I feel that I don't want to do that on the hoof in a bit of a muddle, which it feels this is all happening a little bit too quickly. So I was going to suggest, and I don't know if this is possible, but I was going to suggest that we definitely review, we set ourselves a timetable. We don't try and do that all tonight, but we do it over the next 6 months. And in the meantime, rather than having no SSP in place, that we actually vote again and possibly agree to put this, the current one that's on the table that we were presented with tonight, and bring that to full council and hopefully have it agreed so that we do have an SSP in place until we get the results of the review, and which we set a timetable for now, which is possibly in 6 months. It would mean taking another vote, which may or may not change the original vote, because I would accept it that we're going to review. I think everyone's agreed on that. We're going to review. Whilst we're waiting for that review, I would rather have an SSP in place rather than not have one in place while we wait for that review.
So, Councillor Madiman, I think you're proposing another motion, so it would be a question of whether or not Councillor Rahman is willing to withdraw his motion so that yours could then be before the committee. And then once we know that situation, I could comment on what you just said.
But the comment from Councillor, we had a comment from Councillor Sanderson and Councillor Ligo before then referring to these proposals for amended motions or rejection of motions. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's really a point of clarification from Joshua, where the mention of when licenses are issued, even if the venue closes down, the license still stays. So how long, what period of time does that cover? And if the licensee holder then changes the name of, pops up in a different form and comes back as a, in the same venue, but, looking like a different entity. Thank you.
Yeah, Joshua, please can you answer that question?
Okay. Yes. A license remains indefinite as long as the annual fee is paid. If an annual fee remains unpaid, then a license is suspended, but that suspended license remains indefinitely until someone's willing to come along and pay any outstanding debt on a license. So if it's been expired for 10 years, someone who really wants that license, to use that license, could come along and say, I'm going to pay 10 years worth of annual fees to get this license unsuspended and transferred into my name. They could absolutely do that. But licenses do not expire. They either get surrendered or they can lapse if the license holder is a company and that company is dissolved.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Lygo, and then we'll turn to the motions.
Trying to get
Thank
my
you.
head around exactly what we're doing in deciding. I mean, my main concern, as I alluded to earlier, was just about legalities of this as well. And I guess in hindsight, we should have brought this to officers' attention before today, given them a bit of a heads up. And I guess depending on which motion we look at and what's the length of consultation, if there was one, I guess I'll just throw that out there. But I guess I support Councillor Muddleman's. I'm more than happy to second that, to be honest, because I'm just concerned with some of the issues she laid out. And there's been lots of discussions and lots of confusion about what is actually going on and the legalities around this.
Okay, I'm just going to clarify, therefore, taking that into account, the process here. We have before us Councillor Oman with motion with the reasons for refusal, but at the moment, but review rather, with the amendment of Councillor Ottino's comments as well. And then we have the second option that has been put before us. So those are the two options. Thank you.
So the first motion that came before the committee was from Councillor Rahman. We needed a seconder for that. If it's to be put forward, thank you. Councillor Ottino is suggesting some amendments to that motion. It would be down to Councillor Rahman whether he was agreeing to that, and that would be the revised motion, which would then be voted upon. If it's seconded, which it is. If that's voted down and it falls, then we can move to Councillor Muddleman's motion.
Okay, thank you. So therefore, are you still, Councillor Raymond, based on the debate, wanting to put forward your motion?
I think not having a policy in place is a bit of an anomaly because there's still an application. So it wouldn't be that we'd be unsafe. However, I agree with Councillor Muddyman that let's step back and in essence agree with what Alex said first and have a deferral. So therefore, I'm happy to withdraw my motion on the basis that we can do what Councillor Muddyman said, which was take a little bit more time and get to where we want to get to.
Okay, so and therefore, if we are to do that, just seeking legal advice
Yes,
on
so
this.
then
So we've got Councillor Ottino did have some points though that could they be addressed as part of Councillor?
If Councillor Muddyman is willing to
Muddleman's.
include Councillor Ottino's requests in her motion.
So I think so. I think that would mean that those are the things that we would look at when we review it, and we would name those things as things that we were going to look at in the review and set a timetable. Is that?
maybe one.
Okay. So just a point of order before we take the vote on the motion that Councillor Madiman has made, so that we're all clear on that. The advice that we're getting is there can't be a temporary policy. Anyway, it has to go through full council to get approved. At the moment, we have recommended that it isn't going to full council for approval and that we are going to have this review. We've said that there are therefore these reasoned, clear points that we're making as to why it hasn't been recommended at this stage, and that is because there's certain items as shared by Councillor Roman and Councillor Altino as to why a review would be useful. But we are saying our presumption is still that we would like one, but we just want to review it and then bring it forward to council once that has happened. Is that correct?
You're basically would be instructing the officers to carry out further work, present another report, bring it back to this committee for further debate. So addressing the points of concern at a later date is basically well, the committee has voted against the policy going to full council tonight. That's what you voted for. And so unfortunately, if you want to consider it again, there has to be further work done and a further report, and it has to come back to the committee.
Yeah, so Councillor Madiman, just do you want to clarify, any clarification?
I think I understand. It's not allowed. We're not allowed to sort of change our minds and have that vote again and let it go. Right.
But your motion can still stand in that these are the points that are reviewed with this goal to bring it to the next meeting to then review again to put forward a recommendation to the full council. So that is what we are instructing with your motion. So.
Okay.
Councillor Altino.
The officer said that some things couldn't be included in a review, and there would have to be additional policies which would sit alongside this. So can we instruct you to suggest some additional policies that might satisfy some of our concerns that would sit alongside that? Is that fair? Yes. And then we'd leave it up to you and Alison to decide what could be fitted in the policy and what would need to be an additional recommendation. I get policy, the recommendation that the committees would look at.
So, Councillor Antino, my understanding from Councillor Daly is that Councillor legal advisor Daly. Sorry, Daly.
Daly sounds quite Spanish, but unfortunately it's Irish. It's Daly.
We're wishing we're in Spain at the moment. Is that we would instruct the officers to address the concerns raised, and they would put forward a report to us, so that those points that you've just mentioned can be addressed in the body of the report. Is that?
Yes, and I don't want to further complicate it, but there is an option of forming a working group that would work with the officers. But actually, the officers always consult with the cabinet member for licensing, and with in future, I'm sure that they will say. So there would be consultation with members, and the officers have been here listening to all of the concerns, and I'm sure that they would be able to prepare a report addressing what is what they can, and also putting forward, if it's possible, suggestions for an extension to our current statement of licensing policy, which might, outside of a saturation policy, address some of the concerns, which I think is what you're driving at, councillor Martino. Does that sound right? Joshua, although.
Yeah, just from the officer perspective, before we take the vote on, yeah.
Yes. Sure. I think the Councillor Martina, you're right. There's much of what was proposed that I said can't be done under this existing policy lawfully, or if we did so, it would be against the Secretary of State's guidance. But as legal said, like made clear just now, there are other policies perhaps where some concerns could be addressed. It may be that what you're recommending the officers to do is not come back with a cumulative impact assessment and a proposed SSP, or perhaps we are presenting a cumulative impact assessment with an SSP, but also rather than a single recommendation, what you would like to see are alternative recommendations. If the committee don't want to go with this option, what other ways could there be to address similar concerns? And it could be perhaps that with time and consultation and who knows, maybe a working group, we could come up with alternative recommendations. However, any report that comes to the committee goes through that process of head of service, essentially. So it would come, we would make these recommendations through, and the deputy chief executive for communities and people would be the person that says, yes, I'm happy with those recommendations going to the committee for presentation. But that may be the way to do it, is if you're wanting more options, you could maybe request that we see if there are more options. The report may say, this is the only option. I don't know yet until we go and do that bit of research.
Thank you. So we'll take a vote now, which is for the motion that Councillor Mudderman has put forward, which is instructing the officers to address the concerns raised in the meeting tonight to respond to these concerns in the report and set out next steps for our recommendation to full council. So is everyone happy with that to vote? And therefore, and it was seconded by Councillor Lygo. So therefore, all those in favour of Councillor Mudderman's motion, please raise their hand. Yeah. Oh, and thank you. And then all those against? All those abstaining? Okay. Thank you. So that a motion has passed. Therefore, the officers are instructed to do this report and bring it back to this committee with addressing concerns raised and provide recommendations for addressing these concerns through the cumulative impact assessment and special saturation policy, recommendation to full council and or other policies going forward. Therefore, at this point, we turn to...
Next date for the committee is September, just to confirm, so that report will come back before the committee in September.
Thank you. So that will be for September's meeting. And then I think we have therefore addressed this agenda item. Thank you to the Cabinet Member for causing
I'm not welcome
a much longer meeting than we had anticipated.
I do apologise. I didn't intend you to spend 3/4 of an hour talking about the issue and an hour and a quarter on the process you needed to address it through. That was not my intention. I do apologise, and to officers as well by now.
Thank you very much. And we will be in touch to discuss this. We need to now approve the minutes from the previous meeting. I recommend to approve the minutes unless anyone has got any amendment. Yeah, okay. All those in favour, can you raise your hand, please? Thank you. So those are approved. So the dates of the next meeting, 22nd of September is the next one, and then we have one on the 9th of February. So put those dates in the diary. We will now have a pause for about 2 minutes to move around, and then we have our now delayed General Purpose Licensing Committee, where we now have to think maybe invite back in the public speakers that we had to see if they're gone.
Or you can do if you, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And then, so we will pause that, and then if we can all stay here for our General Purpose Licensing Committee where we need to elect a new chair. So thank you.
Okay, we'll start general purposes licensing committee now. I need to take nominations for a chair. Yes.
I nominate councillor Clarkson, please.
Does anyone second that? Okay, any further nominations?
I nominate.
And anyone second that? Okay, any further nominations? No? Okay, could I please take votes for councillor Ligo as chair? Oh, sorry, sorry, Clarkson. I'm writing. No, I'm reading out who proposed it. Votes for councillor Clarkson as chair, please. 4. And for councillor Muddiman. 1, 2, 3, 8, 7. Okay, so councillor Muddiman will be chair. If you'd like to come up here.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your confidence in me. I will do my very best. It's my first chair of any committee, so thank you. Okay, so then hopefully this will all be wrapped up very quickly after the last meeting. So the next thing is the election of a vice chair. Can I see any nominations for a vice chair?
May I nominate councillor Clarkson, please?
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that? Thank you, councillor Waite. Any other nominations for the post of vice chair? Councillor Raymond, thank you. A seconder for that? Thank you, councillor Mundy. Any further nominations? No? Okay, so we'll take votes for councillor Clarkson. All those in favour? Five.
Yeah.
Thank you. And those in favour of councillor Raymond? You can't vote twice, Chair. Six.
Okay.
She did vote twice, but.
Councillor Sanderson, where is your vote?
Yeah, my vote is going past the vote.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
Ah,
So is it
so then it's 4-7.
I've already voted, yeah.
It would pass anyway.
Let's not get to another.
No, it wouldn't make any difference, Mark.
So I'm going 4-7, so.
Yeah.
Councillor Raymond.
So councillor Raymond is vice chair. If you'd like to come up and be vice chair. The next item on the agenda is any apologies for absence. I know I have some from councillor Rule. Are there any others?
Councillor Taylor's also left.
And councillor Taylor and councillor Upton. Okay, so 3 apologies. Thank you. Number 4, the declaration of interests. Do we have any declarations of interest? No, great, thank you. And now let's move on to the item 5, the appointment of subcommittee. So can we have the report on the subcommittee? Hello, that's you.
Hello. So it's as read in the report. However, this one does abide by political proportionality. However, within the body of the report and in the recommendations, it is noted that because of the political makeup of this committee, it is recommended that members decide to vote against political proportionality so that all 15 members of the committee, subject to you attending the training, can attend and be appointed to the licensing subcommittees. So I think, Chair, with your agreement and a seconder, I think we need to have an indicative vote to confirm that members are happy to vote against the proportionality. I will remind you, as I'm sure you're very well aware of, following full council last week, if one member votes against the recommendation to abandon political proportionality, we will have to appoint the subcommittees by the council's political makeup. So by that number, it would be one member from the Labour group, one member from the Liberal Democrat group, and one member from the Green group, making up every single subcommittee. And I will also note, just for members, as Councillor Rahman is from the Oxford Independent Group, that's right. We will need to confirm, if you do go for political proportionality, that you'll need to appoint a different vice chair for the subcommittees, because he would be entitled to attend as the chair of subcommittees B and D. So.
Okay, thank you. So the proposal is that we go against political proportionality, just as we did last year, to make life easier. Does anyone have any questions, having heard the officer's report? Does everyone understand?
The A, B, C, D thing? Or
Yes. Yes.
It's not going to be like the other committee where you volunteer?
No, it would just mean that we don't have to always have one Labour, one Lib Dem and one Green on every committee, and that some of the independents can also be on the committee, and we can mix up the numbers. It will make life easier, as it did last year. Okay, so, but everybody needs to vote for it in order for it to go through, because if one person votes against it, it will fail and we will have to go with political proportionality. So can I take a vote on the motion being that we are going to vote?
Needs to be seconded.
Oh, thank you. I need a seconder. Don't we need a proposal? No. Thank you. I'm proposing. And Councillor Jupp is a seconder. Okay. Can we see all those in favour, please? Thank you. I think that's unanimous. That was unanimous. So all against, no. Yeah, thank you. So we have agreed that we will drop the political proportionality. Okay, so now we need to establish the subgroups.
So what I would suggest, just for everyone in the room, so in table 1, you will see the allocation of membership of each committee. So with the vote of the chair and vice chair and agreement to abandon political proportionality, the chair of subcommittee A and C will be Councillor Muddyman, and the chair of subcommittee B and D will be Councillor Rahman. So what we need now is councillors to make up the rest of those subcommittees, and it's a further 2 for each subcommittee from any political group.
Thank you. So can I have proposals? Do we need to vote on each one or complete? No, okay. We can do them one at a time. So can I have people who'd like to be on subcommittee A?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, what do we do when there's more than, we only want 2? What do we do if we've got more than we need?
Yeah, you can just do 8. You want to just put 8 people. Yeah. If you would like to just nominate 8 members of the committee to fill up places 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 and 10, then I think that's suitable. So I think we should raise hands and then we assign.
Okay, raise your hand if you'd like to be on a subcommittee.
It's 8, but so. Hold on.
It's everyone. It's also
Is that all of you?
Yeah.
And that's right. Will
Plus Councillor Rule, who's not here. So actually.
Come on. Do you want to do that?
Councillor.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're just waiting for clarification about how we can include everybody. Councillor Miles? Yeah.
Just I think last time we considered if you knew you were definitely going to be available for some of these dates, you could already indicate, and then that might make it helpful just in the allocation. That was all.
Okay, thank you.
That was how we did it last time.
Thank
you. Should I go through the date of each subcommittee and then confirm which 2 members would like to be on each on those subcommittees? I think Councillor Miles did have.
Yeah,
should be
okay.
on the availability.
Okay, okay, okay. We're still going to have the issue that if we get more people than we want.
Take it to like, and then.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Jonathan, who's going to run us through it meeting by meeting, and we're going to appoint committee members to each meeting as by date.
No, that's it. You know, put ourselves out in the bridge with a number to do. That's what. Then you'll end up swapping.
Just give us a moment while we sort this. I don't think we've ever had this situation before where everybody wants to be on the subcommittees. This is new. Okay. Yes. Okay, so we have a new proposal from councillors over here, which is that we would, instead of appointing 2 councillors to each subcommittee and a chair or vice chair, that we appoint 3 councillors to each, so that we've already allocated, if you like, the sub. And then we decide on a meeting by meeting basis, you know, who is going to be the sub. So that is different to what was proposed in the table. So if I'm going to propose that as the solution, can I have a seconder for that?
Yes.
Thank you, councillor Ligo. So, and then can we vote on that we're happy with that as a solution? Yes, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, right. So in that case, now we need 3 to be on A, 3 more to be on C, 3 to be on B, and I think we'll end up with just 2 on D, won't we, because of the numbers? Yeah. Okay, so can we have, so everybody's going to get on one. So can we have a proposal for 3 to be on A? Okay, that's Theo and Mary and Ian. I'll take those first 3, okay? So and then for B, 3 more people to be on B. I'm seeing councillor Waite, councillor Ligo and councillor Sandelson, thank you. So you're all on B. And then for C, I've got councillor Mundy, councillor Ottino and councillor brain dead, sorry, councillor Miles, thank you. I knew that. Okay, so that leaves 2 to go on to councillor on D.
James Taylor. And Rosie.
Jane, yes, okay, James and Rosie.
Mohammed.
Yes, and yes, councillor Mohammed, okay? On D, is that okay? Right, I think we're done. Do those numbers all add up?
Yes, we do. We just need to have a final vote to confirm the memberships.
Oh, yeah, just, so I'm not able to, just point of information, I'm not able to attend the training on the 3rd and the 5th. So I'm going to be trained, after that date. And so councillor Raymond and I will, between us, we may juggle the chairing and vice chairing of the first committee, the first two, just because of my availability and until I'm trained. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to ask officers to read out the final proposal. Sorry, councillor Sanderson.
Yes, I read your circular about not being able to go to the training. It's going to be really difficult for me to attend on the 5th as well. So if there was an alternative date that I
Thank
could
you. There will be
do
an
that.
alternative date, so we'll make sure that you're added to that.
Thank you, because the first committee would be on 23rd of June.
We need a final vote on those allocations to committees. Will you read them out for us, officers?
Certainly. So, so first of all, let me just quickly double check the recommendations. Agree the duties of the subcommittee as set out in Appendix 1. Recommendation 2 is establish the 4 subcommittees, which is now with 4 members, which is 3 members of the subcommittee and 1 reserve. Agree the substitution is permitted on each of the subcommittees and agree the members' meeting dates and times listed. And just for the members, so the membership of subcommittee A will be Councillor Muddyman, Councillor Jupp, Councillor Clarkson and Councillor Yateman. One of them will be a substitute. For subcommittee B, it will be Councillor Rahman, Councillor Ligo, Councillor White and Councillor Sanderson. Again, one will be a substitute. Not substitute, whatever. Reserve, that's the word, thanks. Subcommittee C will be made of Councillor Muddyman, Councillor Mundy, Councillor Tino and Councillor Miles. One is a reserve. And subcommittee D will be Councillor Rahman, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Rule and Councillor Zad. And again, one of those would be a reserve member.
Perfect, thank you. So that's the proposal. I put that forward. Can I have a seconder for that? Thank you, councillor Otina. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimous. Okay. Just to agree the minutes from the last meeting. Does everybody agree the minutes from the last meeting? All those in favour? Yes, carried unanimously. And then to confirm the dates of the next meeting as the 22nd of September and the 9th of February. Okay, and that's the end. Thank you very much.